Konnichiwa, young artists. This is Miss Betty and Charlie Deer, the traveling lamb. And as you know, I am in Japan. And I'm in Japan for a very special reason. I've shared it with all of you. But we have in our family a brand new baby boy. And his name is John Luke William Hickman. And as some of you know, when I was in Newnan at the art house, I did some paintings for him. His spirit animal is the lion. So I did this lion when I was in Georgia. Now I'm in Japan and I need to do some more sketches for him so that I can then paint a few canvases while I'm here. And as you know, we always begin with a preliminary sketch. So I'm gonna choose to do a kangaroo. And I'm going to start, you know how I always start with my sketch bubbles. I call them my sketch bubbles. And they are round circles and ellipses and straight lines. And I'm gonna start today by doing a quick sketch. You know, kangaroos have really big feet, and we've discovered that Liam also has pretty large feet for a baby. So I think that it's appropriate that I begin with doing a kangaroo. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a couple of different images of animals that we want to do a painting of. And so you know how important it is once you get your preliminary sketch done, then you have to figure out your color palette. You have to decide exactly what colors are you going to use. And you know, getting the right color for a kangaroo isn't as easy as you might think. So I'm trying to put in kind of the color that sort of like a reddish brown. That's kind of what I'm thinking. Okay, so I'm gonna get all that color put in there. And you know how watercolor is. It flows very much with water. It is called watercolor because that's how it moves. It isn't dry. Now when you move to acrylics, it'll change a little bit. So I'm just gonna go ahead and put this color in very helter-skelter, but what I'm doing is I'm laying out my palette. And by palette, I mean I'm telling myself what colors I'm gonna use when I move to the canvas. Okay, so I've got all that going on. I'm gonna finish that and put a lot more color in it. And I'm choosing to do it with watercolor. You know how we do that in class. We've been doing that for years that way. That way, it gives you an opportunity to see just how you want it to look when you get to the canvas. Okay, so I've got his color scheme pretty much in there, but I do want some background color. And I want him to be sort of in his natural habitat. So I'm going to start laying in some greens and just see how far I get with that. Now remember, this is a preliminary, so I don't want you to spend a lot of time on it because you're going to move to the canvas next. Okay, so I think we're ready now to move to the canvas. Okay, so you know when I say canvas, we use canvas boards like this, and it's a rough texture, so I can't use my watercolor brushes on it anymore. I'm going to move to acrylic. Now that we have done our preliminary sketch and a little bit of color to get our palette, we're ready to move to the canvas. But we don't want to paint on a plain white canvas like that. What we really want to do is prepare it a little bit so that we have a ground. Okay, so there you go. All right, and the way I do that, using my acrylics watered down with a lot of water, with a big brush, I put the background color in. Okay, so once that's dry, then you're ready to resketch your drawing of your animal or whatever subject you're using on your canvas. Got my tone canvas. Now I'm gonna go into drawing where I want my kangaroo to stand. And remember, don't forget that you're doing a light sketch just to get started. Okay, so there's the belly. Okay, he's got really big haunches because you know how they jump. Okay, and you're going to get that tail in. And make sure that you stay within your borders of your canvas because you want to have good balance in your drawing. Okay, so big haunches and those big feet. Remember we talked about those big feet? All right, and he's got to have the foot on the other side. Right, looks like he's getting ready to jump. And I like that, and I like the way it looks. Okay, now we don't want to forget about the baby. We want that baby in the pouch. So I'm just going to have the baby peeking out, maybe with one little flipper hand coming out. Okay, and oh, they have those big old ears, and those big old ears are just so fun. And then remember how we do the face. We want to balance it nicely. It's got a big old nose, and we're going to put some fun eyes because, you know, we're not trying to draw what they really look like. This is truly what we call, you know how I talk about drawing from life and drawing cartoons. So this is going to be a fun one. Okay, now think his little hands, you know, they have the hands that really reach out. Okay, all right, I think I've got enough preliminary sketch that I can actually now put away the pencil and start painting. We are now ready to actually add our acrylic paint to the canvas. And I'm excited because these are brand new Japanese acrylics that we bought here in Yokosuka. And so I'm going to open the paint. And you know, I'm kind of going with that color because that's sort of what the color is, but we may need to add something. I'm going to add a little red because he's a kind of a reddish brown. That's what I'm aiming for. So I'm going to put a little bit of that out. And now I'm going to see what kind of color I get. Okay, I think, ooh, I kind of like that. Remember, this is a cartoon, so it doesn't have to be exact. And you know, color blending is always a science. It's something that each one of us, okay, I'm kind of liking that. Okay, now I'm going to start painting this guy. I'm going to do what's called a wash of color. And so I'm going to kind of go over, you're going to see that I'm going to go over some of my lines. And I know, young artists, that kind of worries you because you say, oh gosh, I did this drawing. It's going to be so perfect and I'm going to paint it so carefully. And actually what you're going to do now is you're going to go over those lines, but you're going to still see them just enough, just enough. Okay, so we're going to bring out those arms. Remember, one arm is on one side of his body and one is on the other. And I make sure I get that pouch in there. So I'm just going to keep doing what's called a preliminary wash. Okay, again, we're going to add deeper color after we get him all put into the canvas, sort of like what we did when we were using watercolor. Okay, so his big feet again, and we're going to keep working that color and see we're using water and we are using acrylic. Later we will use less water when we actually get how we want it in there. Then we'll sharpen it up. And you know how that goes. You have to take your time at that point. So I'm just going to get him all kind of washed in. And then, remember, I'm going over my line, so don't be nervous about that because you can go back and correct anything later on. That's the lovely part of using acrylics. They're very forgiving. You can just kind of play with the color and you can sharpen it up when you're ready to feel confident in the paint that you've laid out. Okay, get those ears in. I love those ears. So cute. And we want him to be really cute, and I want him to be smiling because after all, he's going to be in Liam's nursery. Yes, that's where he's finally going to be. He's going to be smiling from the wall, just like the other paintings that we did. When Joshua, his daddy, was a baby, some of those paintings are going to go into his nursery too. And one is a bear, one is a elephant, And now we're going to add all kinds of other animals because, you know, we feel like Charlie deer is always influencing us on using animals and being kind and practicing the golden rule. Right, Charlie? Okay, so now I think I've got enough paint in here. I'm seeing him. I'm seeing how he looks. Now I'm going to abandon the water and I'm going to go back, dry my brush really good. Yeah, really, really good. And I'm going to start thickening up the color. And I want it to be chunky, so I'm going to put a lot of color on the preliminary that I just laid in. Okay, you see how rich that's getting? Still a little bit of a gold tone into that red. See, and his face is coming down. I'm going to put a nice rich color there, and then, you know, inside of his ears, I may even add some pink, you know, because sometimes their ears, when you think of a rabbit, their ears are pink inside. I sort of think that kangaroos would be like that too. Okay, so I'm getting that in there, and his ears are kind of flipping around because he's wandering. He's out in the grass, and I'm gonna put a lot of grass and jungle grass in the background. And I'm now gonna start laying in color that is, and you see sometimes you'll have a little blip here and there, but it doesn't matter because remember, we're gonna put him with a lot of grass in the background. Now, I want my students to always have confidence in what they're doing. That's one of the things that we teach the young artists of Newnan and Coweta County is to have confidence, not to be afraid. You jump in, and then if you feel like, ooh, I need to improve that. See, right now the pouch doesn't have a baby in it, but I'm gonna paint the baby over when this is all dried. See, in that way, I don't have to be nervous about painting teeny weeny brush strokes around the baby. Okay. Those big old legs. I love those big back legs. I've seen a kangaroo in a zoo, but I've never seen one in real life. Someday I want to go to Australia. That's where they really are mostly there. But there's a lot of other places in the world that they are too. New Zealand, I think, has some. And you know, the neat thing is Liam's aunt, Gianna, lives in New Zealand. And we're thinking of honoring her presence in Liam's life with this kangaroo. Okay. So you see how the paint is getting thicker? You see? And we're doing it by layers. We'll keep putting in some layers. And I want it to be a little furry too. I think they have, I'll have to do a little research, but I think that they're kind of furry. And it's okay because remember, we're doing a cartoon. We're not trying to draw them as they actually look. Okay, and I'm gonna make I'm gonna bring this down here, and right in here is where I'm gonna add the baby later on. Okay, so it's so much fun to be able to paint. All of us can do it. You just have to have confidence, and you have to be willing to try. Never be afraid to try new things. Okay, I'm so glad you woke up so you could help me, okay? Because look, I'm doing a kangaroo for you. This is going to go in your room. Okay, so here I am with my brush. You see the brush? This is a nice round brush. So I can put in, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to add some blue tones so that I can do a shadow inside the baby's pouch, because that is where I'm actually going to put a little baby kangaroo to represent you. Yes, I am. And so I'm gonna, in fact, we could, name it Baby Liam if we want to. Okay, so I'm gonna do that shadow right there and create the pouch. Okay, and I'm still gonna be using a little bit of water, but not so much now that we're into using our acrylics, because we're trying really hard. Now right in there, Liam, is where I'm gonna put the baby, okay? And I'm gonna have to be very careful, so I'm gonna let that dry first, okay? But I am gonna put some of these blue tones in here to give me some shadow. I am trying to get this kangaroo to a point that you can see how it's necessary to build layers when you're painting. Now you see I wanted to put the baby in, but the area was so dark, so I put a little white to kind of bring out the little baby. Now the baby's going to become more the color of the mommy, but at least I can see that I've got him in there now. He's in the pouch. Does he look like he's in the pouch? Okay, so I'm going to keep on painting and keep on laying in my layers. I'm going to use less water to begin to give him a little texture too. Her, I cannot believe that. All this time I've been saying him, and it's not a him, it's a mommy kangaroo. Of course it is, because she's carrying the baby. So we need to think of a name for her. So I welcome all of you to think about, what would you name her? Because I think we're gonna call the baby Liam, okay? So now I'm gonna start darkening in the baby so that he's not so. Time to start putting in the background. So I've started putting in some strokes, and I'm using a bright brush, and I'm using a little small edge brush, a flat, and I'm kind of wanting to give him an environment into like a jungly kind of look, and so I'm gonna use that to nestle him into the grass. And I'm gonna go back and really get more into detail. But it's always nice to get your main subject in, but not perfect, because you're gonna then create a background. So I'm gonna softly, we have our canvas toned, so I've got some greens in there, but now I'm gonna very softly with this lovely brush. It's called a Bright, and I love them. They're nice to use. And I'm gonna start keeping him, and you notice I'm not using green, I'm using yellow and blue. And when you put yellow and blue together, what do you get? Yeah, you get green. But I kind of like the balance of the yellow and the blue, and I kind of like painting it on the canvas and just letting, and you see I'm using the flat side of this brush. And look, I'm putting in the grass kind of over his feet. You see that? Because he's sitting into the environment. Here I am using yellow and blue, and I'm popping my brush back and forth to get kind of a definition between the light and dark of the grass. And when you think about that, when you go out and look and see grass naturally growing, it's not all one solid color. It's got different shades and different textures, and that's kind of what I'm going for here, trying to get some really nice balance in his background. And because this is for Liam's room, he loves flowers, so I might even put some flowers in the foreground. So that will be what I call my final steps when I'm really trying to put the detail in. And those of you who know how I love to use line. I just might have to get my black lining pen out and put some real strong lines in this, because it is a cartoon, and that's when you can do a lot of lining. And then I can put a little bit more detail, especially into his face, because they have whiskers. So I want to put whiskers in. I'd rather not do it with a brush. I think I'd like to try to do it with my black lining pen. So when you see this next, after I really get some good work done on it, you'll see whiskers. You'll see some flowers in the foreground. Remember now, this is the foreground and this is the background. So I'm trying to do that with my brush. Now I'm ready to do some flowers. So I'm going to put some what I call pressure lift. I put the brush down and then I pick it up and I go back and forth with my lights and darks. And that gives me an interesting flower that looks a little pretty much realistic, as you would see flowers growing in nature. But then later I'll get my pen out and put some more detail in them. Okay, so the flowers in the very close, where you see very close to his feet, they're going to be big. But when I get back here, those flowers are going to get smaller. Now, why do you think that is? They get smaller because that's going into the background. So you got your bigger flowers in the front and your smaller flowers going into the background. Okay, we learn that in art, don't we? It's one of the young artist lessons that we talk about. How do you make things look like they're close up and receding? Remember, the artist creates what the viewer sees. So we've got a lot of that going on. Now, I am kind of limited on my paint colors, because, you know, during COVID, even I cannot, even in Japan, I can't go out and get a lot of supplies. So I'm using what I have. You can see how just popping that white on top of that after I put in a color, how it begins to kind of look like petals. So that's what we're kind of aiming at. So I'm going to just keep going around like that. And you see how it begins to really look like it is a flower? Yeah. Now I'm not showing the stem. And you wonder about that. I could show a little bit of stem, but for the most part, this is kind of like a field of flowers. That's what we're aiming for. Remember, they get smaller as they go back. Now I think I'll put a lot other colors in, but right now I'm working with pink. And so I'm going, there's the red, and then I'm going to pick up some white. Okay. So the bigger flowers are in the front, remember that? And I might even put one way down here at the very edge of the canvas. That's kind of interesting, because, you know, you want the viewer to think, oh, this is like a landscape, and it just keeps moving. Yeah. Painting is so much fun, and you really need to just go for it. Just go for it, okay? So now you see I put that dark in, so I'm going to kind of clean my brush off a little bit, and I'm going to pick up some white. I've got to put out some white. You know, white is one of those colors you really have to keep it clean. So I usually try to put my white and my black in the edges of my canvas, of my palette. Okay, so there's some white right there. Okay, all right, now I'm going to pick that up. I'm going to dot that right in there. Now, do you see that? See? You've got some definition in that flower. And over here, that's dried a little bit, so that helps. When it dries a little bit, you can put, see how, look how that is popping out now. See, it's just confidence. It's just confidence. It's just going for it. That's what we teach at the Art House. We teach confidence and just having the encouragement of teachers like Miss Terry Lewis and I to make you want to do it, okay? So we sort of call ourselves cheerleaders for the arts. That's what we really are. We're cheerleaders. Okay, now you see how you can just keep going back and forth. I put some whites in. Now maybe I'll pick up this pretty red and let it land on top. You see how these go back and forth, and then later when they're nice and dry, I will probably use my pen, because you know that's the thing I love to use, and I'll give it some nice definition.
Okay.
Now I'm in a position to start putting in some more details with the pen, and that's the thing I love the best. So I'm going to start and show you a little bit about how I like to use a pen. I have always used Sharpies, and they come in different points, and they really give you a nice true line. And so I'm going to show you how you can sharpen up your paint and I want to show you how I'm going around. I'm going to do the grass in this position, so I can show you how when I laid the paint down for the grass, how I can show his little foot behind the grass. Okay, so that's what I'm doing now, and I love using the pen. I do all kinds of painting, and I certainly teach different forms of painting and drawing, but I really do enjoy using the pen. So you can see right here in this little area right here, where his foot looks like it's really down into the grass, and then I've kind of given him an edge to define that nice leg. Okay, so I'm going to keep working on this, and you'll see how the pen helps. And I'm going to do little lines like this, little choppy lines around his little face, and put a few lines up here on his head, and define his eyes a little stronger, and his nose. Now I don't know if you can see that very clearly, but notice how his face is beginning to come to life because of these few little lines. One of the things that is a joy to an artist is that when you figure out what your own style is, then you start doing it and you're kind of obsessed with it. And my students know that I love to use line. Well, we are finally finished. This is as close to being finished as I will allow it to be. It will have a nice coating of a shiny varnish, and then it will be ready to be framed to put on Liam's wall. What do you think? What do you think, Charlie dear? Think it's pretty good? Oh, thank you for reminding me. I need to sign my painting. So that's the very last thing I'm going to do today, and I hope you've enjoyed this lesson.